everybody. Welcome back to another episode of the Sad Dad Games podcast. Today, you are joining us for an episode of Eric's Indie Corner. My name, obviously, is Eric. I'll be hosting today. And today, joining me, I have two of my good buddies who are...
Hi, I'm Shan.
And I'm Tucker.
Yay. Tucker and Shan. We're super excited today. We're talking about a game that Shan and I both really enjoy, and we're going to try to convince Tucker to give it a try. This one is what we in the business call an oldie but a goodie. It's old by like indie game standards. It's one of the earlier kind of progenitor indie games, I feel like. Today we're going to be talking about Limbo, which obviously you already know because you saw the thumbnail probably.
You should have done the Michael Scott like
do the drum roll. Or what is it, a New Girl where Nick asks for a drum roll, or Schmidt asks for a drum roll, and then Nick goes ba 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 ba.
Oh, yeah, ba, 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 ba,
snare drum. I shouldn't have to specify.
Yeah. Cymbals are part of the drum set.
Yeah.
Jess is doing that.
Just love the you shouldn't have to snare drum, obviously.
And then
so anyways, I'll try again.
When he does his Nick Cannon thing because he's thinking about Cece's boobs or something.
He's thinking about Cece and Reagan together.
Oh, that's what it is. You're right.
I just watched Drumline like 2 days ago because
it is great.
I started my new job and it is so accurate. Schmidt's mirroring of Nick Cannon's drum solo. Yeah.
So I messed up the intro. Let me try again. Tucker, give me a drum roll, please. We're going to be talking about Limbo. That's the perfect drum roll. It's exactly what I want. Talking about Limbo today. Limbo is a side-scrolling puzzle platformer developed by Playdead. It released originally in July 21st of 2010. So it is almost 15 years old, which is pretty cool. Other notable games from the studio. Later on, they developed another game called Inside, which is a great game. We'll cover that probably later on the show. But so we're excited to talk about Limbo today. We're going to break it down into some categories like I always sometimes do. First of all, we're going to talk about story, then we'll talk about visuals. Oh, no, I got that out of order. First, we'll talk about story, then gameplay, then visuals and sound. That's why you guys come to this podcast. Who wants something to be nice and polished when you can hear me accidentally say things out of order and mess up my flow? That's what you really want. Yeah.
And we're not gonna pay the editor enough to actually go up and scrub that out. So
nope, we're not gonna fix it. That's just what it is. You get to hear me say oops and then do it right. Yeah.
We'll do it live. That's a deep.
It's all live.
To play us out. What does that mean? If you go watch Bill O'Reilly freak out. Is it Bill O'Reilly or is it Sean Hannity?
No, it's Bill O'Reilly. It's very funny. It's classic YouTube stuff. Like Papa Bear 10 or so years ago, he didn't, I think it was just he didn't have the teleprompter prepared and the camera's rolling and he doesn't know it. And he has he has an aneurysm on camera saying, fuck it, we'll do it live. And he's yelling at everybody in the room. It's an amazing video. People need to know about it.
Man, how have I not seen that? That sounds fantastic.
I think we need to throw a link in the description.
Yeah, drop a link in the description, and then when it airs, I'll give it a watch. Well, I love that. So anyways, back on track. We're going to be talking a little bit about Limbo's story. Limbo's story is intentionally pretty vague. It is kind of... it's very, very vague. Really what happens is you are a little boy who wakes up in a forest. It's a dark and spooky forest, and you have to keep going right. And as it kind of goes on, creepy things happen. But really, the story of Limbo for me is all about the atmosphere and the vibe and the tone that is set. And actually, so going back to an earlier thing, I did it a little bit different for this episode. So when I said story, visuals, and sound, and then gameplay, that was actually right because I intended to change it for this episode. So we're going to talk about story, and then I wanted to talk about visuals and sound after that because I feel like the visuals are such a big part of the story. I wanted to lump them together. So I'm just all sorts of mistakes today. That's just what we're doing.
Mm-hmm. Still not going to fix it.
Still not going to fix it. It's just raw and real. That's yeah.
We call these the raw dog edits. For some reason, we can't get our editor Emily to put that in like parentheses in the title. I don't think it would help us in any way, but I just want people to know about it.
Well, SEO reasons, people Googling raw dog might help. Be a little disappointed when they come across our videos.
Yeah. It's just Pornhub us.
Yeah. Second result.
Depending on which state they're in.
Yeah, that's the dream.
Exactly. It might just be us.
Yeah. You want to pop up in the search bar right under the porn. That's where you want to go. Yeah.
Right in the sweet spot, as they call
it. All right. So one of the reasons I want to talk about the visuals and sound right afterwards is because the main part of the story of Limbo really for me is the atmosphere of everything. And the visuals are fairly unique, as everything is black and white. And so your character is like a silhouette with big white kind of not glowing, but like big white eyes. And so your character is a silhouette. Everything is black and white, but the art style does a really good job adding depth of field to things and kind of blur and fog so that it's very clear what's in the background and what's in the foreground. And they do a lot of kind of playing with shapes of things so that certain elements might come out of nowhere when you're not expecting it, or they do a lot of interesting stuff with shapes, basically, because they can't use color. It's all just black and white. And that really helps to set the vibe and the tone for Limbo, the spooky kind of oppressive atmosphere where your character is in a place that you don't fully understand and you feel uncomfortable and you don't know exactly what you're doing there or why you're doing it. And so I really think that the visuals do a great job of supporting the story. So Shan, as someone else who's played Limbo, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, it's we're kind of like mired these days in complexity with games, and this is kind of right in like this interim period in games where we were starting to advance in like some more interesting visuals and ways to tell stories, but we could still be simple about it. And they also, like any smart artist, chose to be very stylistic about their idea in a way that enhanced the story that they're telling, but also made it immortal because they built to the system and the capabilities that they had at the time. So now it just looks good forever moving forward. But in its simplicity, because they have all the noise taken out, you're able to focus on the story, and you're able to also just like do some really like lateral puzzle solving. You think about things differently because of how they did the level design in this game. So it got clever in a way that I think games at the time hadn't started thinking that hadn't tried yet. It was a little bit of trailblazing. I think that's why a simple concept was able to be a progenitor in its genre and stand out.
Yeah, Limbo was, I like the phrase progenitor. It was really kind of an early format for a lot of like 2D puzzle platformers, which was something that we had seen a little bit of before, but we've seen a lot of since then. And Limbo set kind of a good template for a lot of those tropes and ideas and things moving forward. And one of my favorite things is, again, talking about the sound and how the visuals and sound tie into the story. They also do tie in a lot to the gameplay. There are some times where puzzles have to be solved by paying attention to the sound. There's one spot in particular where if you're not listening, you're just kind of looking there like, what do I do? But then based on some actions that are happening on screen, and then you hear a sound slightly off screen and you're like, well, maybe I'll go back and look at that. And that helps you to piece together that next part of the puzzle. And so it's just a clever marriage of visual and audio that supports the story and the gameplay. And I think that Limbo does a really good job with that.
Yeah, they also just they to compare it to the seminal Half-Life 2, they were able to take simple physics and turn it into puzzles.
I was just about to start talking about the physics. You read my mind, man.
Yeah, it's brilliant. And it's just like games like Astrobot just got to doing that. And like people are talking about it because it makes a game feel more immersive and impactful. But it also like it's a language that we all understand without having had to learn the game first, because we all understand intrinsically how physics works. And so you see something and you're like, well, I know what I would do in real life, and you can just like kind of deduce how these puzzles might be solved, and then you just kind of tinker at it and you're like, the game lets me do that, and the puzzle breaks, and it's just like that's brilliant. And so like we need to get pushed back into puzzle solving that's not just standard lock and key, but is physics based, because it engages an entirely different part of the mind when you're puzzle solving that's just very fun.
Well, I think that's the brilliance of the Portal games and why they hold up so
That's exactly
well.
why.
Portal games
like
hold up
what
so
20 years
well.
later, yeah,
Yeah.
and it's because that physics based problem solving
Mm-hmm.
or puzzle solving, and where there's a billion different ways to do it and some really funny ways to do it too.
For those of you who just know, Shan made a blunder and he put a note in it to clip it. So Shan clips his own mistakes, but not mine.
Yeah, but I pay the editor. What do you pay for, Eric? Nothing. Nothing.
That's a fair point. That's a fair point. So, but yeah, I think the physics do a great job of supporting this really interesting puzzle solving, where it doesn't create a lot of room for you to find different solutions than what the developer intended. I did watch a speed run. I played through the game and then I watched a speed run as well, just to see like, you know, what the strats were. And there were some times where you can kind of exploit the physics engine to do some wonky things and skip past stuff that there. Nothing super crazy, no like skipping entire huge segments or anything, but just to get through something a little quicker. So that I thought that was cool that, you know, when you have a physics engine and you have a puzzle game, stuff like that inevitably is going to find its way into the game when the speedrunners get their hands on it. But I think that the physics system in the game does a really good job of supporting the animation and art design as well. Mm-hmm. Even little things like how your character will jump and clamber up a ledge has some physics elements to it. And so, you know, if you jump and you pull up and it's like the ledge is way above your head, he clambers up a certain way. And if it's at like waist height, or like he just barely misses it with his feet, and it all kind of dynamically, you know, the character interacts with those things in a dynamic way and clambers around and moves around realistically. And that level of intentional animation mixed with physics animation works really, really well in this game. And I think that it's something that can work so well because your character is just a silhouette, that they can probably kind of fudge some of the details and make it look a lot smoother. And that's another thing with the animation in this game is I don't always normally enjoy rigged animation as much as I like frame by frame hand drawn animation. And so for those of you who don't know, the difference is frame by frame animation is where you draw frame 1 and then frame 2 and then frame 3, and it's like different images that play in a sequence that make an animation.
This is Hollow Knight.
Yeah, so Hollow Knight uses like frame by frame animation. Most pixel art games use frame by frame animation. And then rigged animation is where there will be like a drawing of a character, for example, and then that character is assigned a skeleton. You know, like there's this rig here and then this rig here for the forearm, and then you can move those rigs, like that skeleton around those joints.
It's technically all 3D games, but
so all 3D
2D,
games.
yeah.
But yeah, so when you use rigged animation in 2D, sometimes for me, I don't personally enjoy it as much. I think sometimes it can be used very well. But I think it's used very well in this game and in Limbo, because it really is just shapes with no colors. They can use rigged animation to look very, very fluid. And so this is an example that I go to of like a really great way to use rigged animation versus what I prefer, frame by frame animation.
Yeah, the character gives off like strong marionette vibes because of it, but it also just like, for me, being a millennial, like it immediately puts me in the headspace of like the Flash era of the internet, where everything was rigged and like
well, I mean, it came out in
like
2010, so it was kind of Flash era.
I
Yeah.
think it was built on Unity, but like probably that's
Well, I
like
don't think I'm not saying it was a
that's
Flash
what it was
game, but it
inspired
was
by.
in that
Yeah,
same
exactly.
time. Yeah.
But people who know what I'm talking about, just like, do you remember like some of those like free to play games on the internet, like
Oh
Insane
yeah.
Aquarium and stuff like, and like they made the mistake in school of like giving us access to the internet, so we'd go to those free sites and then we would just like play games all day on those free Flash sites. It was an incredible time to live. They wisened up after that, but we were the
Yeah.
pioneers.
Did you guys at school block the HTTP version, but then they were just coming out with HTTPS, so you could just go HTTPS and go to your Flash games? It was glorious.
Man,
before
unlocking all these
school
memories.
IT part. Yeah.
No, but in middle school, I was in the like for my TA, the morning class that I had like almost every, I think it's once a week or something. I was in the computer class and we found a way to get bypass the initial screen, and then every morning, because the computers would be wiped clean every day, we would download a bunch of pirated games, like
course.
Flash games, and just like, do you remember Battle Tanks or whatever it's called?
Yeah, it was like Pocket Tanks or
Pocket Tanks, that's it.
Was it Pocket Tanks? Yeah, I love
And
Pocket
then-
Tanks.
And then just like that chicken game, the Chicken Invaders.
Oh my
that was-
gosh. I
Chicken
forgot all about
Invaders.
Chicken Invaders.
I played these games
You did
every
an episode on
day
those.
that I was in
You
that
just
class.
Unlocked a part of my brain that I completely forgot about. I love
Because I
Chicken
played them
Invaders.
every week for years in that class where she was not in, she was like having an affair with some other teacher, so she was not engaged with
I think I
helping
know
us.
exactly who you're talking about. I remember all of that. We might have been in the same class. Shan and I went to middle school. Did we
They
go to
ended
middle
up
school together?
Yeah, we did. They
Yeah, we
ended
did.
up
That's
getting
right. Yeah, yeah.
married by the
Yeah.
time that I left, but yeah.
No,
I was there while
totally
they were
remember
like
that.
I was there while they were flirting with each other in
Yeah.
like in front of us. And we're like, okay, cool. As long as we get to go back to playing our games.
Whatever. You guys flirt. I'm just about done with this game of Pocket Tanks. Yeah. So
We'll have to do Flash era. We'll have to do
that's a
like,
great. We can
I would
collect a
love-
bunch of
and then-
ones and yeah.
and DOS games. Like we went through all of that stuff.
I would love to do a special like throwback episode about a bunch of old Flash games. That's a great idea. Make a note of that.
Okay.
So all of this to say, we've been talking about it a little bit, but to kind of touch on the gameplay, really it is like it's a very linear experience with not a lot of choice. There is, I think, one point in the game where there's a branching path that you can go kind of one way or the other, but even then it kind of loops back in at the end and you end up in the same place. Not a ton of replay value, but I replay it every once in a while just because I think it's fun. But once you play the puzzles, you kind of know how the puzzles work and things like that. One really small quibble I have with the game is that some of the puzzles, not like 99% of the puzzles are great, but every once in a while, some of the puzzles requires some trial and error or having prior knowledge of like having played the game before, where you're not quite given all of the tools to intuit the solution by yourself. You have to kind of trial and error it, which might be intentional because one of the selling points of Limbo is the very fun and surprisingly gruesome deaths that happen when you fail a challenge. It's like you'll just be, because it's kind of a dark and spooky game, but the visuals are sort of cutesy, and then all of a sudden something horrible will happen and your character gets smushed into goop or impaled on a spike or decapitated, and you're just like, oh my gosh, I was not expecting that to happen. Like, oh my goodness.
Was detated.
His kappa was detated. But so that minor quibble aside, I think that it does feed into the shock of seeing your character horribly maimed without warning. So it's not really that, it doesn't hurt the experience that much. But I think that the gameplay is really solid. It's really, really simple. You can move back and forth. You can jump. You can climb onto certain ledges, and there's a grab button that you can like pull levers and pull boxes and stuff around. And so it's another one of those games where your moveset is really, really simple. And so the variety and complexity has to come from the levels and the environment, which I think is a really fun way to do puzzle games, because it creates kind of an easy to learn, hard to master situation where towards the end of it, it's really testing your skills, but your actual like list of commands and things that you can do is pretty small. Like your toolkit's not that huge. And so I think it kind of forces the devs to be creative with how they create puzzles. And I've said this before, I'm a strong believer that restrictions breed creativity. We talked about that a lot in one of our previous indie episodes. And so I think it's a cool way to for the devs to force themselves to be creative when creating these interesting puzzles is by really limiting the moveset of the player.
Yeah, you should have seen Tucker and I a few years back. We tried to create a board game, and every time we created a new board game, or we played a new board game, we'd be like, well, let's take those mechanics too, and let's
It'll
take
just
those
be every
mechanics.
board game all in one.
It's every board game. That's why it's amazing. and obviously we didn't finish. It
did not come to fruition.
No, I remember you guys had a couple times reached out to me to do artwork. It started off as a card game, and you requested, you're like, this is kind of what we're thinking. And so I drew up, I don't know, like rough designs for probably like 20 or 30 cards and final designs for like 5 or 10. And I was doodling cards and a bunch of ideas, and then it kind of fizzled out. And then like a year later, you were like, it's not a card game anymore. It's a board game. Can you draw blah? And it was like a completely different thing. And so sometimes like just
same
saying
spirit,
like,
though.
Same spirit. And so, but like creating restrictions and being like, these are the bounds that we have. Like I've limited my creativity to. It kind of forces you to be more creative. So
yeah. Pick one or two things and then do them amazingly.
Yeah.
I do remember though the Penguin Captain Kirk.
I do.
Yeah, that was the one that was on my mind too. That was the only one I was thinking of.
I have those cards somewhere.
Here, hang on. Let me hang on. I think I have them all still. So it was originally going to be called, I don't have a more high-tech way of doing this. Seals versus Penguins.
Yeah.
Hang on,
there it is.
You can see my ring light. That's Seals versus Penguins. And then I'm going to get doxxed. You can see the reflection in a Shut Up series.
Is that your social security number?
Yeah, I was doing a bunch of banking stuff in the background. And so hang on, let me find the Captain Kirk one. It was Captain Kirk.
That's the best one.
That's the best
Captain
one.
Kirkwin.
Captain Kirkwin. And then we did one that was what was the one that really tickled me?
These aren't even like puns. They're just like lazy portmanteaus. Just like half the Pokedex, you know?
Well, we did one. This was just a sketch, but we did one that was a cat burglar, and it was just a penguin stealing a bunch of cats. And that's just it's so. But anyways, so
it got us talking again.
You got us talking again.
We weren't talking a whole lot at that time.
Yeah, so it got us talking, and that was fun. So that was a tangent aside. Before we started recording this episode, I was like, Limbo's not very long. It should be a short episode. And then here we are, tangents galore.
Yeah. Got flash games,
flash games,
flash card game.
Yeah, all the good stuff.
Bill O'Reilly. Covering the gamut of things.
Covering the bases. Just getting a wide
people need to know this stuff.
Yeah, people need to know this stuff. So back to Limbo. Fun fact, Limbo was originally released as part of the Xbox Live Arcade, like when they used to do the Summer of Arcade things. I don't know if you guys remember that. But it was a good time where Xbox would pick a handful of indie games to prop up and say, look at our cool indie games. And they would sell them on their Xbox Live Marketplace. And I remember you used to have to go to the store and like GameStop and buy an Xbox Live Arcade card. But the points were different than it was like $10 would get you 800 points. And so
just
like
some
15 because why would so like $15 was like 1,200 points
ratio of Stanley Nichols to
$4. And so nothing like on the Xbox, like anytime you would download games or even like DLC for games, it was all points based. None of it was dollars. And so you'd look on there and be like, oh, this is 400 points. That's $5. And it's like, why wouldn't they just do a direct translation to but I remember when Limbo came out that it was 800 Xbox points, so $10. I paid 800 Xbox points for this on my Xbox 360, which is what it originally launched on. So I thought that was like a fun nostalgic callback is when paying for things with Xbox. I don't know. Did you guys ever do that by Xbox?
I didn't have an Xbox at the time that they were doing it.
Yeah. I had
Tucker remembers
cool,
Xbox points.
Yeah, since I was an only child and lonely when my friends weren't around, I had a bunch of single player games, like some knockoff of Bejeweled. Did a lot of that.
Oh man, did you ever like Peggle? Did you play Peggle on your Xbox?
No.
Oh, Peggle was a good one.
Yeah.
But I remember we didn't have like wireless internet at the time because we were, and I wasn't allowed to have internet in my room. And so whenever I wanted to download something, I would take my family's, like we had one of those TV VCR combos with like the little tiny like 19-inch CRT TVs that had a VCR connected to it. And I would take that up to the computer room and my Xbox up to the computer room. And then I would take the Ethernet cord and I'd plug it into my Xbox. And then I would just sit there in the computer room like this while it downloaded. And it would take forever because we had the slowest internet in the world. I remember downloading the DLC for Mass Effect 3 like that. I'm just sitting in my parents' computer room just like...
Yes. 5 megabytes a second that takes a while.
Well, for the Mass Effect 3 DLC, I plugged it in and I left it to download overnight. And then when I came in back in the morning, it was almost done.
13%.
It was like 80% after like 9 hours. So that's the kind of internet I was working with. So different time. That's just to give you kind of that's where I was at when I played Limbo for the first time. That's the kind of life I was living. Those were the sacrifices I made to play my games. So yeah, Limbo is a great time. Gets a hearty recommend for me. Playtime is about 2 or 3 hours. It is pretty short and there's not a ton of replay value. But again, like I said, it's one that I like to revisit every once in a while just because I find the atmosphere so engrossing. And then available platforms is originally it was on Xbox 360, PlayStation 3, but nowadays you can find it on Windows, Linux, Xbox One, PS4. It was released on PS Vita as well, for any of you if you still have a PS Vita, Nintendo Switch, iOS, and Android. So all sorts of platforms, and it is a whopping $9.99, but it goes on sale pretty frequently. I think I've bought it a bunch of times. Every time I get a new console, I get into Limbo again, but I think this time I got it on my Switch and it was like $2 or something. So check it out for a sale. Give it some support. It's a cool game. Good stuff.
All right.
Any last thoughts on Limbo before we end it here, gang?
No, what's the partner game? Inside?
Inside is also by the same studio. It came out a few years later, though. That's one we'll cover again, or we'll cover in another episode, because that's a great game, too.
I think they often are sold together, aren't they?
Yeah, I don't know about like on the Switch eShop, which is where I buy most of my indie games, but I think probably they're bundled. It would make sense for them to be bundled. They're very similar games.
So I think I got like a physical copy that had both of them, but we're gonna have to cover that later. Inside, I love it even more, but as like they feel like spiritually connected.
It's almost like a direct sequel. Like Inside, it's like an evolution of what Limbo is.
Yeah. So strong recommend for both. So if you see a bundle, take it all.
Yeah, it's all good stuff. They're both great games, but we'll do it. We'll do Inside in another episode.
Been very disappointed that when you've described the atmosphere, you guys have not said it feels like you're in limbo.
It feels like you're in limbo.
Right there the entire time.
It makes
so
you feel
lazy. Like you're Batman. Yeah.
That's just terrible. It's not even like a punish. It's like something you said.
Being in
wasn't
limbo?
Even a joke.
That is a very common phrase.
Yeah, but it's not like
we know
funny.
That it's a phrase. Shan was commenting on the laziness of the joke, Tucker, not the content.
It didn't even feel like a joke. It was just like something that people say.
But here we are, all laughing. So it worked, Tucker.
Yeah,
like saying something's in limbo. That doesn't even feel like an atmosphere adjacent. Like the connection between them. It just feels like reaching.
This is another example of when someone else says something and Shan feels the need to just keep talking until it shoots them down and they feel bad about everything.
Well, it wasn't my joke, so I hated it.
If I didn't say it, it can't be funny.
There,
all right, everybody. That's going to do it for us. Thanks for joining us on this episode of Eric's Indie Corner. Remember that you can find our podcast on YouTube, YouTube, Apple Podcasts, Spotify. You can also check us out on Instagram and I think TikTok. We've got some stuff going on there.
For 1 more week.
For what?
for one more week.
Oh yeah, that's right. TikTok is going away. So by the time this
you
airs,
never
TikTok,
delete it.
yeah, by the time this airs, TikTok might be gone. So Instagram, check us out on Instagram. Every day on Instagram, I post my Dadish scores. Dadish is another series that we did an indie thing on. So check that out and check out my Dadish scores every day. Try to beat them, and you probably can because I'm only sort of good at it. But thanks for joining us. We really loved talking about Limbo, and we'll catch you guys next time. Bye.
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 Outro. Bleepy doof, bleepity, bloopity blow.